Hello, my loyal listeners. Get ready for another heartfelt discussion with my good friend Martha Creek. How are you doing today, Martha?
Very glad to be here and eager to do anything that gets empowered teachings to the whole of the world, which is what I'm alive to
Exactly.
do.
Exactly. That's what you're here for. And Martha is a speaker and a coach, minister, workshop facilitator. I've been in many of her workshops and read her books, and an expert in the art of right questioning. So Martha can call forth the most stubborn, self-defeating, and embedding patterns in a person while inviting these people into a new reality. And I've been one of her people that had that experience. So, Martha, you just wrote another book. It's called Presence and Potential. Yeah. Okay.
I did. I have. Yeah.
So, share a little bit about um, your background and how it influenced the theme in this book that you wrote. I had your other book.
Well, the this book is really training, cultivating our own inherent innate skills that we have that are seldom ever used if we're not mindful and conscious in it. And it requires us to interrupt the patterning that we innocently took on based on emotional, familial, and relational dynamics that we had that started when we were little kids. So each chapter, 26 chapters of it, is really a spiritual practice. For example, like accepting that there'll be times of solitude, that I won't be popular, that I have to stand alone at times. And it's not alone, but it's like I may be the one in my family that thinks and feels differently about a matter than everybody else in the family. It may be that my spiritual practice is to regulate my own feelings, my own anxiety, stressors, worries, instead of trying to control and regulate other people's stresses and worries and emotions.
Okay.
So every single chapter of the book is a spiritual practice.
You know, times I do that. It's like taking on someone else's feelings, thinking I should try to give them advice or fix the problem. And excuse me, I'm having a little problem here. And it has to do, I think, a lot with old patterns that you learned, and now you have to unlearn them. Is that close to what you're talking
A-
about?
Absolutely. And it's absolutely been proven, Mimi, that we can. Like our brains are wired primarily for survival. And almost everything we took on is because our brains couldn't differentiate. As a little kid, we didn't have that kind of brain development that we don't know that when we don't get our way, that it's going to kill us. And you can watch little 2 and 3 year olds have a complete overwhelm, a complete meltdown, undoing when they don't get their way at times, because then the brain is formed with, if I get my way, it's okay. And when I don't get my way, it isn't. And we're just a now grown up 60, 70, depending on your listener,
Yeah.
40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90-year old that's still in a triggered traumatic response of not getting our way. And the great news is that learning can be, your words, unlearned, that our brains can actually formulate and structure new neural pathways so that we don't have the same wiring system in place. So we're not going to be as reactive to certain tones,
Mm.
bodily expressions, body languaging, um, uh, eye movement, attitude,
Oh,
that
yeah.
people are then freer to be whoever they're going to be, whoever they are, and that we are freer not to be so reactive to their reactions so that we can stay clearer thinking, and in the higher part of our brain. And we're the only species with that big brain up there, and most of us seldom ever access it because we're living from and relating only to the smallest part of our brain, which is the animalistic brain.
Yes. And the first step is realizing that and realizing that you have patterns and things ingrained in you from your past that can trigger you. And I still get triggered once in a while, but I had a meltdown like a 3-year-old in September. as a caregiver, it's one thing. But then it was like my phone being hacked, my credit cards being hacked, the person actually calling on the phone and threatening me. And it was just so much of problems with technology and not knowing my own limits and not asking for help. And everything got straightened out, but not before I had a lot of blow ups, yelling to nobody, just yelling and cursing to the wall.
That's the part though, that's important to say. Like on the phone this morning with someone, and I encouraged her, like, what could we do together? And she said, I just need a big scream. And
Mm,
I said, it's really true. I wish I could encourage you and all of you listeners and I've been doing this since I was a young girl, and I wouldn't do it at people
right.
and with people. I would go get in my car when I could drive. I
Yeah.
would even leave my office place or my work environment and go sit in the car and just scream my ever loving head off
Right.
and release some of that pent up tension and stress that also can keep us from going into overwhelm.
Right.
We can do that stress is one thing, overwhelm is another.
Yes. And I
Stress is
know
one
people.
thing,
Mhm.
and chronic stress, but actually having our nervous system to short circuit,
Yeah.
to shut down or collapse or fall to our knees or something is an entirely different matter. And we can absolutely care for ourselves in whatever way we have to by
Yeah.
screaming some, cussing some,
I
yelling,
see.
exercising, walking, writing it out, um, whatever we can do to say, I've got to offload some of this,
Yeah.
or my nervous system
Yeah.
absolutely
I
short
did
circuit.
all that. Yes, I did. And then I realized I do have a support system and I needed to lean on that support system. And um, our youngest daughter came down, and I was able to go on a 4-day cruise alone. And I mean, no friends, just me and my shadow. And trust me, it was the best thing I ever did. I got to meditate. I got to be stress free. I didn't have to worry about anything, what was being served for dinner or anything. So, two things there: self care and asking for help. Those are two things that help me.
Well, that's two things that helped you. That's also two of the things most of us high functioning, powerful, responsible people won't ever do. Like,
Exactly.
even though it's like we have no doggone good sense about it. And so asking for help sounds like a very little thing to some people, but for those of us overdoers and overfunctioners and highly responsible types, like the thoughts of having to ask for support, or in your case, to know your limit or to admit that I have limits, is enough to make our skins crawl off.
I know, and I'm getting better. I'm learning. I had a day that was packed with stuff, and I had one last thing. It was a prescription. I was like, oh, I just can't do another thing. And I went, well, I called somebody and I said, are you going to be out and about today? They said, yes. I said, could you pick up my prescription? I'd be glad to. I never did that before. That was like a big thing.
It really is a big thing. And I want to encourage you and the listeners and me, even as I say it, to be willing to, if that friend had said, no, I don't have any plans to be out and about today, to say, it would really support me if you would go out and about today just to pick
Yeah,
up my prescription.
yeah, yeah.
And it's like to be daring enough and to undo some of our fears of being an inconvenience or being a
Mhm.
burden on somebody or being too much for them, to say I've got to loosen some of that in me. So even though they hadn't planned to go out today, I'm going to ask them to go out today because I could truly use the support
Right.
today.
And now that I've done those few things, people are uh, letting me know they're there more than ever, like calling to say, do you need anything or how are you doing? And they realize now what spot I am, what kind of spot I am in. Because otherwise it was like, oh, she can handle it. She can handle anything. Well, I can't. So getting back to the book, and it is called Presence and Potential. How do you define those words when it comes to your book?
Well, I don't necessarily define them, honey. Potential is, for me, and I think probably described by a dictionary as an aspect of ourselves that is untapped, you know,
Mm,
hidden without nobody hiding it, but hidden out of our awareness, a
right.
potential that we have that says, in the same situations I've been in throughout my life, there is an untapped, unrecognized, undeveloped potential in me that
Hmm.
is actually infinite. So I have inherent, innate resources in me that
Right.
I have not cultivated yet, that I'm not yet discovered. And for me, then it's a direction to go in,
Mm,
not potential as a noun or someplace we just arrive or anything, but a direction to go in.
yeah.
And present, you know, as defined by my connection with higher source, that it is a spiritual practice of entering through whatever way we can, silence, a prayer, mantra, a word, a deep breath, to say that I am going to connect with the divine presence in me. Whatever you and your listeners see as their higher power,
Right.
God, source, life, breath, universe, and
Right.
that it is when I am in awareness of that,
Yeah.
that I don't have a life, life has me kind of shifting.
Mm,
And it's transformative,
yes.
and it's also the way that we can bring some quiet and calm and calming peace to our minds to enter into this presence. It's also the possibility we have then to be freer of doubts, of projections, of worries,
Mm,
of imagination gone wild with
mm,
what is awful, 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 awfulizing it.
yeah.
And it's the practical benefits then of this to simply align presence as defined by aligning with our true divine self, our higher self, the essence of who we are.
Yeah. And for me, I was always proud of the fact that I was a multitasker, that I could do two or three things at once. And then all of a sudden, that wasn't happening anymore because there was too much stress in my life. There's too much going on. So um, I do breathing, and I don't just mean breathing, I mean to stop and take a big breath and hold it. And I also been doing mindfulness in the most trivial things. I don't care if it's pouring a cup of coffee, because I was starting to do some crazy things when I wasn't being mindful, like, you know, pouring mouthwash in something else, or I grabbed something for my eyes and it wasn't for your eyes. It's like you better watch, be mindful. Like you can't just pick up a tube and assume it's toothpaste. And I did all these things and I thought, okay, all right, you're stressed, you're overwhelmed. Be mindful of your little daily chores.
Yes, honey. And that's mindfulness, and that's the one you share here. It's quite consequential, honey.
Yeah,
And it can bump up against these notions of, well, there's no mistakes. If you had to put something in your eye that didn't go in your eye or something like that, like, oh well.
yeah,
It's like, well, oh well. And if it came to me to pay attention, that if my mind wasn't split and I wasn't multitasking and I wasn't doing 12 things at once or in a hurry, if I presence myself before I start to administer drugs in my own eye, then I would have not done that. So,
I know. I was like, are you getting senile? Is this dementia? Like, what's going on? And then it was, no, no, Mimi, it's stress. It's trying to do too much at once. It's not self care. You're not taking time to just stop. Just stop. Like I was running from one thing to another, from one
yeah.
errand chore. So, as far as our listeners are concerned, they find this, some of them. hard to do, believe it or not. Just the mindfulness or taking time to do a couple breaths. And I had a doctor's appointment. I had my thyroid was being checked, and the technician, you could tell, was overworked, overwhelmed, too many patients, running behind. And I came in and I said, "Would you do something for me?" Breathe. And she did. And she stopped and she took a nice deep breath and she held it. And, she was thankful that somebody did that because she was very overwhelmed. And that's it. We don't think to do that.
Well, that's a great example of it. And also would offer caution here, just based on my own direct experience of how much I ran around for decades doing what you're doing, thinking I'm going to be of a benefit to somebody. And at times, in your case, it worked beautifully. Somebody was very open to it. They stepped right into your kind-hearted offer for, can I can we just have seconds, not even a minute, but seconds here to reestablish ourselves. And the same thing could have happened. You could have said, "Hey, could you do one thing for me? Could we just take a few seconds here and just breathe?" And yes, and thank you. And here comes the exhale. The other polarity of that could have been, "Don't tell me to breathe. You have not." So it could have went the other way.
I know.
The very thing that we're trying to offer an antidote to, it could have jacked them up even
And you
worse.
have to be prepared for that. And I think with me, I can kind of sense who to do that with and who not to do that with. Like I would never do that with some of these doctors that I've been in contact with who are no longer my doctors because they flunked that course in medical school called bedside manner.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a great point to use here too. Like the nature of your teaching and the shows that you do is for well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Means then if you already know, doctor, whoever it is, friend, environment, going in, somebody told me they went into a certain restaurant and it's like they were being stung by bees.
Yeah.
And it's like to keep going back into that same restaurant is not wise, sane, or sensible, and it's certainly not self-care.
No.
Instead of saying, "I'll be happy to go with you to a meal and I will not go to that restaurant. And I'm going to go see a doctor. I'm actually going to continue my medical care, but I'm not going to that doctor."
I've done that. I went to see a pulmonologist a few months ago, and he walked in. He was very nice, and he said, "I see that I'm your third pulmonologist this year." And I told him yes, and then I told him why, because they had failed that course. And he laughed. And he said, "Well, I hope you're going to keep me." I said, "I can tell already I am." So I have no problem with that. When I go to a doctor for the first time and I take on their aura, the vibration around them, the persona, I can tell if I want to be with them. It doesn't matter how qualified they are either.
That's right.
I don't
It's
need
just
that.
like that's right. It's like my metaphor of it's simply a shoe that didn't fit my foot.
Hmm.
No blame on the shoe, no blame on the foot. And I can't wear a shoe as much as somebody else thinks it's lovely and the best thing going. If it rubs a blister on my foot,
Nope.
I'm the one
I'm
responsible
out of
for
there.
that.
And
Yeah.
I have the same primary for 21 years. So it's not that I'm a lunatic. I just know what I need and I take care of it. So back to our listeners again, I think they would like to know what kind of steps they can take to get there to their higher self and live in wholeness. Do you have anything to
Well,
offer?
yeah, to understand that it's not a one and done something, that it is a direction to go in. So it's one thing to spout out a platitude like "be here now." There's how many thousands of books written on "be here now," here and now. And it's another thing entirely to inhabit this. It's another thing entirely to embody present moment
Mhm.
and to navigate the judgments of the mind and the resistance of the mind,
Yeah.
and to say, even with all that, I'm committed to practicing presence, interaction to interaction, transaction by transaction, person by person, more and more, that I'm going to cultivate the how to be here now. So it's not just a one and done.
No.
And it also includes then detaching, conscious detaching from specific results, thinking that it better turn out the way I thought, planned, it better turn out the way they agreed. I have their word on it. We signed a contract on it. It's like to continue to release and let go and allow our attachment to these outcomes that we have in mind. Also, I'd say to continue to question all the beliefs that we have. Every single thing that we believe is built on a narrative, and most of it false
Hmm.
narratives. And self inquiry will help us to uncover this and then to dissolve it. No, even notions like everybody in the world should be kind, people should be kind. It's like, well, people are not going to be kind at times.
That's right.
And it's like the real work is what am I going to do when they show up as unkind?
Hmm.
Because it's going to be both is. It's going to be both kindness at times and unkindness at times, and respect at times and disrespect at times. And it's like accepting the alpha and omega of this, the both and of this. It's not a one or the other of this.
Yeah. And the
And
acceptance is a big thing. Acceptance is a big thing.
which is like it's not just theoretical acceptance,
No.
but an embodiment of and inhabiting a reality of acceptance and
Yeah.
accepting what I don't have control over, which is most of everything. And occasionally I can control my response. And at times I can't even control my response to something.
Yeah.
That leads us, I think, to what the mother lode of it is, which is to be accountable for our own inner world.
Mm.
And the tendency is, and this is 2,000 plus years old, of blaming external circumstances, blaming external people, blaming attitudes, blaming actions, anything. All of that disempowers us.
Yeah.
It disempowers us 100%. So, all true potential, all true growth from our potential comes from taking full responsibility for my own emotions, my own actions, my own decisions, my own thoughts, my thinking, and whatever else that I do at times have some control over. And I'm really immersed now for the second year and devoted to a deeper practice of self compassion. And it means then taking acceptance to self acceptance,
Yeah.
embracing my own imperfections, perceived imperfections, embracing and allowing my own humanity, that this is the way I am, is also the way my brain got wired up,
Right.
and accepting that I've got human learning processes too. And the way I saw a matter or handled a matter, that is part of my own evolutionary process. So I believe then that self acceptance, self love, whatever you want to call it, is really the cornerstone of spiritual awakening.
Yeah. It's so funny because it's like I have three daughters and they're totally different personalities, all three of them. And two of them call quite often, one does not, and not just me, her sister too. So things like that. But I'll try not to get in the middle of it, but like I could say, oh, well, where's Christmas at this year? And the one sister will say, I don't know. Well, did you talk to your sister? No, she needs to call me. Like that kind of thing. I hate that. It's like, well, why don't you just, then I get my nose in there. Well, why don't you just call her and say, oh, I'm just confirming, where are we? Why did I? And then I'm like, okay, I'm out of it. I'm out of it. And she said, well, she never calls me. I said, well, she doesn't call me either, and I'm her mother. I said, so what could I tell you? But I have compassion for the both. And I know there's reasons that that dynamic is going on, but I can't fix it. So I have to get into acceptance, which I am. I just let it go. And I'm just glad I'm not going to be there Christmas because I won't have to get further develop, into it. But families, holidays, this can trigger a lot of things. And I think that's one of the practical steps that people need to do is to think ahead. How am I going to handle that? Because when I go to that house for that party, Uncle Joe's going to be there and he's going to say something political and I'm going to lose my mind. Right?
Well, and that could happen, honey. It's just we also have the potential to be there,
Mhm.
not expecting Uncle Joe to be any different than he is. So
Exactly.
that when Joe shows up at Joe, then I show up in integrity to myself, which
Exactly.
is your relationship. And this is only for me, maybe. My relationship with you, Uncle Joe, matters to me,
Mhm.
me not losing my relationship with you, and we simply disagree
Right.
on this. So I accept that we disagree, and I don't want it to ever come between the way of our relating. So
Yeah.
my relationship with you matters, and I disagree with where you stand on those matters.
Yeah. And I just visualize the version of myself that I want to be. And that is someone that can say and do what you just did and just handle it gracefully and, just back way. I mean, it's very, these days I'm trying to make new friends because it sounds terrible. But all my friends now are like over 70 and they're either dying or going home, which means another state, or going to nursing homes. Everybody's not as healthy as I might be. And so I was told, make new friends. Okay, so I'm trying to make new friends. So this one woman, I thought, oh, she's going to be good. And one day we're on the phone and she started talking about politics. And it was obvious that she might not be on the same side that I might be on. And I deflected that. I said, I don't like to talk politics. But she hasn't called me since. So I don't think that's going to be a good, stable friendship. So it's really politics and religion. When I grew up, they said, don't talk about politics or religion. And these days, you can really mean that. So when I say visualize what I want myself to be, the version of myself I aspire to be, I have to accept that it's going to be a gradual change. I'm not going to do it in one day or 28 days, right?
Absolutely right, honey. And even in there's science around if you do something 21 or 28 days, you develop a new habit about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I absolutely have got that as a lived experience. That's not just blah, blah, blah to me. And there's things I've practiced for 21 days and 28 days that, depending on the circumstances, how high the heat is, how much I've rested, how much sleep I've had, the moon cycles, who knows what all's involved here, that I simply cannot do what I intended to
Yeah,
do.
I
And I
agree.
cannot show up the way I intended to show up. So hi ho, back to the practice I go.
Yes. So you just start with small, manageable steps, and you don't think you're going to change the whole package immediately.
Absolutely not. But these little changes have exponential benefit. And anything that it leans us toward our well-being is for the well-being of our marriage, the well-being of our family, the well-being of my parenting, the well-being of my collegial, my workplace, my office place, my neighborhood. So anything that I do, even as minuscule as it seems, is for the well-being of all of humanity, for anybody that believes in quantum theory or
Yeah,
quantum mechanics, that every single thought I have, every regulation I make of myself, every practice I do today, the devotion today affects the well being of the whole organism of humanity.
yeah.
And if sometimes I'm so far gone, I can't do it for myself, but I cannot do it to humanity.
Mhm.
I cannot do it to others, even though may continue to do it to myself, that it causes me to stop to say, what I'm doing here matters, and the way I'm going to say something matters.
Right.
and the way I'm thinking about this matters. And it's enough to interrupt that to say, okay, what's another option here for me? So then it means then that to take another 5 seconds of silence or 30 seconds of silence or whatever it is to say, I've got to restore myself before I respond to this.
Yeah, I gotta
I've got to
reset.
respond myself
Yep.
before I fire off that email or
Oh,
even make that phone call. And I got to check my attitude. Even this, as you and I were getting ready to do this interview today, like going back and forth between neurology, neurosurgeons, and
mhm.
doctors, and they said they sent it, and they said they never heard of it, and they didn't get it, and I said I sent it, and I've already told you I sent it, and it's like, okay, would you please resend it, even though you've already sent it? Clearly, you've already sent it. I'm not doubting you sent it. I'm simply reporting that they don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can we do from here? And it
Yeah.
means then interrupting the attitudes, interrupting and understanding, compassionately understanding that the similar stress that I feel at times,
Mm-hmm.
the whole of humanity is under to a far different degree than I am.
Oh, yeah.
Mo- the humanity doesn't have the privileged life that I have.
Yeah.
That I have times of silence, of contemplation, of reflection, of an ability to do devotional practices in a quiet environment, in a safe home, with all the privileges of running water and food and clothing and no threats on my life today
Yeah.
and other things. And this that is not to be other people are dealing with a heck of a lot on their plates and a heck of a lot in their health and their marriages and their workplaces and their monies and finances and all sorts of things. So some self-compassion dosed out and no micro dosing on compassion, but and not skipping ourselves either. Like I feel like I've been a compassion ambassador for several decades. It's just I hadn't offered that same compassion to myself.
Yeah. That is very easy to do. So in your book, do you use any stories or examples from your own life that you want to share? Uh,
Plenty of them. About every chapter has a story of some sort because
give us
that was
one.
important to me not to. This is not from a theory base. The book is written from a lived experience of this.
Yes. Yes.
And it includes defining myself with each of my brothers, defining myself with my mother, defining myself in workplaces, even in profession,
Mm,
with people thinking that I should take a certain ministerial path, that it was not true for me, and having to say, I know that that's why you would want me to do that. I understand you want me to have what you have and to gain from it what you did, and it's a no for me.
yeah.
Been able to, I was pressured with my brother. I did when I was home to care for our dying father, that I told him if he comes over here and he's drunk when he comes over here, I won't let him in the house.
Mm,
And of course, he did not believe that a bit more than a man in the moon because I had never meant it. I had said so many things through our course of life together. And this was the soul that I love more than anybody alive. Like I was so close to this
mhm,
little brother of mine. I raised him. He was born when I was 8, so he was my little baby.
mm,
And I had he was charming as could be, could charm the wings off a bee, and had most people wrapped around his little finger, including me.
mm,
And I told him, and he said, you can't come in. And he didn't believe me, and he started as charming and all the things that would normally have moved me to go ahead and let him in.
mhm,
And then he started threatening me,
uh-huh,
shaming me, guilting me. You're not the boss of me. You think you run the whole world. This ain't your house. And
mm,
I said, you're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. This is my daddy too. You're right. You're right. And you can't come in. You
mhm.
can't come in. And it was not easy to do. It was not
No,
pleasant. And if you'd have shown me a clip of my life and said, one day in your life, you'll do this, I wouldn't have been able to believe it, that I even could.
yeah,
And even to the point of he threatened suicide. And it wasn't a stretch that he might do it.
yeah,
And in that moment, I certainly didn't want him to suicide or anybody else
no,
suicide. And I said, I hope you won't ever take your own life, honey. And I'm not responsible for your life.
Yeah,
So I don't want that for you. That's not true that I want you to die by any means, and let alone suicide. And you can't come in here.
that was really tough. I can't even imagine how tough it was for you to stand your ground. But I know from my own life, my own history and experiences that I've had a lot of dealings with addicts and alcoholics, and I know someone like that that was so charming and so smart, and he would come in. I owned a bar at the time, and I loved him. He was wonderful. But when he got drunk, he turned into a totally different person. And the term "you're barred" in the business, you say "you're barred." That means you can't come in my bar. And I barred him many times. And I remember the one time he showed up with flowers and balloons trying to get me to come back in. So I understand that charming part. So I won't keep you too much longer. I I did want to ask you though if you have any future things going on. Are you working on another book or just some initiative or
Yeah, I've got a book that two or three books I think that have already been written, and which was the case with these books. These were not something I just sit down and did as a book. So
mhm.
the first one, Martha's Pearls, these are both available on Amazon, and they've already reached 12 or 13 countries. They're kind of out there in the world
Oh yeah,
without me having to do much with them.
yeah,
Um, and it was Martha's Pearls was newsletters that I'd written over the years,
yeah.
and a woman said, "These are outstanding and you ought to put them out in the world." And I said, "Well, you put them out in the world." And she said, "I will." So she went into the newsletters and picked the ones that were poignant to her and
Mhm.
relative to the teachings. And then with a little editing and all that, then handing them over to somebody that knows what they're doing. It went out into a book. And this presence and potential was similar. This is what I've been practicing for over and leading and teaching and developing leadership teams with around for 20 some years.
Yeah,
So it was a matter of just organizing that and then handing it over to somebody that again knows what they're doing to get it out in a book. And there's already two or three more of these things. That one is like based in God as reality,
mhm.
and not God as our imaging of God, but what God as reality. And that likely will come out sometime in the next year or so as a book. And then I've got a deck of cards called Whispers of Wisdom. So, wisdom cards that have a one line something or other on them. That's all on photographs that I've taken around the world with my iPhone.
Oh, that's super.
So, and I've not altered the photographs at all. They're extraordinary. These images are extraordinary. And we've already sold, I don't know how many thousands of decks of these cards, and they've never been really properly packaged in a box or available in stores or Amazon. And somebody's taken that on as a project. So
That's great.
these, and this, she also mentioned this book that this present and potential has great quotes in it. So
Hmm.
likely presence and potential will now become a card deck for how to practice presence, how to
I
practice
like that.
potential.
I like that. You
And
know, the program, the company that I use for my podcast is called Buzzsprout. And they send me like statistics, and I love that they do this and updates. And they just sent me one the other day that said, these are the countries that you are listening to. These people in these countries listen to your show. And they have them in order. Well, of course, United States would be first. The second one was Singapore, India. Like I was Brazil. And what I got from that is we all are one. We all are the same. It doesn't matter what circumstance, what country you live in. People want to hear these topics that we talk about. So I'm always very pleased when you come.
well, it means the world to me too, honey, because it's our similar vision, which is to get empowered teachings to the whole of the world, and then to relax and let go. And we've done our job. You've done what you said you would do. I did what I said I would do,
And
and
we
with
still do.
offered up with wholehearted
Yeah,
reverence for life and living and empowerment, and then surrendered to the will and the way of it.
yeah. So we're doing our part, like you said. And my loving listeners, of course, I thank you, Martha, again for coming. And my loving listeners, as the year ends, give yourself permission to shed the old, interrupt the cycle of false beliefs, and step into the new year with a mindset of possibility. Invite the new year with greater compassion for yourself, grace, clarity, and empowered action to do what is ours.
Amen.
Amen.